We are the Navy Blues. We are the old dark Navy Blues. We're the team that never lets you down. We're the only team old Carlton knows. With all the champions they like to send.
My name is Daryl Christie. I was born in Ararat in Western Victoria, around about 100 odd mile away from Melbourne. Spent all my early life there, went to school, primary school and secondary school at St Mary's. Finished my schooling at Ararat High School. I was fortunate enough to play football with Ararat while I was still at school, in year 11 I think it was. When I finished school I started working in the Commonwealth Bank in Ararat. Then went back to, stayed in Ararat, and we played in a grand final that year against Nil. The first grand final we drew, so then we had to turn up and play again the next week, and we lost by 3 points. So it was fairly competitive. I have 2 brothers, 1 sister, all born in Ararat as well. My dad and mum, they both worked at the Arradale. It was a psychiatric hospital there. Dad was a carpenter there, and mum worked in the mess room with the meals and things like that. I have a lot of mates in Ararat still. Came down to Melbourne in 1965. Was on the Carlton list then. That was Ron Barassi's first year as coach. So it was a big awakening for me, the training and things like that. I followed Carlton from when I remember actually. My father, he worked at a psychiatric hospital down here in Melbourne, and there was a guy by the name of Sox Cooper who was working with him, and he was a Carlton player. Back then they worked 5 days a week and come to training. So Dad became an avid Carlton supporter through that connection, and it passed on down the family to me. So I was quite happy when Carlton asked me to come and play in a couple of practice games. And I remember a coach in Ararat, a guy by the name of Brian Maloney, who played football for Carlton as well, and St Kilda. He said, whatever you do when you're down there, don't sign anything. Ken Hands was the coach at the time, and after the game I played reasonably well actually, and I was in the secretary's office somewhere. They were trying to sign me up. I said, no, I'm not signing. Ken Hands came up and put his arm around me, and I signed, which I was quite happy about anyway. Yeah. Officially become one of their players, but I had no clearance to them because I was still in Ararat. So I played the next year in Ararat, and then, as I said before, we came down here with the Commonwealth Bank, and then got a clearance from Ararat to Carlton. Only played seconds, didn't play any senior games. They were team building at the time, like this was 1965, and you got players like Ron Barassi, John Nichols, Wes Lofts, all these household names basically. And all the younger players were coming through, the likes of Brian Quirk and Robertson, Robert Walls. And in 1968 they won a premiership, so that was the start of a real build-up as far as the club was concerned. I can't remember much about that premiership. I know I went back in Ararat in the Commonwealth Bank, and it wasn't a big hype back then. The next one was in 1970 when they beat Collingwood, come from 44 points behind at half time and won that game. And I was actually at that game as well, which was really, there was 120,000 there. It was a record crowd. The ground won't hold that many now, but they did back then. The ironical part about that one, very good mate of mine from Ararat by the name of Barry Price, he played with Collingwood and he was playing in that game. He was in the centre for them, and he got me the tickets for the game. and I sort of divided a bit. I was sort of hoping he'd get some glory, but I wanted Carlton to win the game. So, yeah, it was a bit tense there for a while, but anyway. Stayed in Melbourne in the Commonwealth Bank. I was working out at Chadstone, so I had to come from Chadstone to here to train. Lucky the bank's closed at 3 o'clock back then, but yeah. Yeah, spent 2 years here, and then in 1966, September 1966, called up for national service and joined the army. I went back to Ararat to actually join the army from Ararat, not from here in Melbourne. And then there's a troop train came from the South Australian border, stopping at all places between the border and Melbourne. I got on the train at Ballarat. We got off in Spencer Street here. Went somewhere in Richmond I think we went from the station. Then we boarded buses, pardon me, boarded buses and went from Richmond to Puckapunyal up near Seymour. That's where we did our recruit training. From recruit training, you had to nominate where you wanted to go in the army, which corps you wanted to go to. I put down transport and infantry. If you put infantry either first or second, you finished up in infantry anyway, which I did. We then, on a train from Seymour to Singleton in the Hunter Valley in New South Wales. And that was in mid to late December, actually getting close to Christmas. We got there, they welcomed us into Singleton and said, you're on leave now till sometime in January, after Christmas holiday. So we had to then turn around and get ourselves all the way back to Victoria. But then, yeah, the corps training in Singleton was pretty full on, but I was fortunate enough, I guess. There was a national serviceman, unfortunately, killed in Vietnam, and he lived in Orange in New South Wales, and his body was brought back to Orange for a military funeral, and the platoon that I was in Singleton, in the corps training, we were selected to do the military funeral. So instead of a lot of corps training, for about a week we trained entirely on how to do a military funeral, which was an experience. I'd sort of forgotten all about that till we start talking here now. So that was an experience. Then from Singleton, we nominated which battalion we would like to go to. I nominated 1RA. And the reason I did that, they'd just come back from Vietnam actually, and it was rumoured they were going to Malaya or somewhere like that. I thought I wouldn't mind spending 12 months in Malaya. But unfortunately, or fortunately I guess, instead of going there, went back to Vietnam. So I flew over in the advance party. We relieved 7RAR. The rest of the battalion came across about a month later. Yeah, and then the whole battalion was in Vietnam. As I said before, I went over in the advance party, and that was an interesting trip over too, because we left Sydney on a Qantas jet, probably around about 9 p.m. Stopped off, landed in Darwin. We were in full jungle greens and everything like that. Then we went from Darwin to Singapore. When we got to Singapore, to get off the plane, we had to change out of our jungle greens into civvies. So it couldn't be said that Singapore was in helping Australia in the war, basically. And back on the plane and back into the jungle greens. Landed at Saigon, Tan Son Nhut, I think it's called, Tan Son Nhut Airport in Saigon. Then up to Nui Dat, and for the life of me I can't remember how we got to Nui Dat, whether we went up in a truck convoy or whether we went up in helicopters. I can't remember that, but anyway. Went out on a few patrols with the 7RAR boys, no contacts. The rest of the battalion arrived about a month later, and then it was pretty much full on. The first patrol we went out on, our forward scout, he got shot through the leg and an arm, didn't die fortunately, and he got medevaced out and home to Australia, but he ended up going back to Vietnam with another battalion later on. But that was an interesting one because he got shot. We had to get another forward scout up, and a good mate of mine, Jerry Ryan, he was forward scout in the same platoon, different section, and he just started leading again, and then he got shot at, didn't get shot. He sort of hid behind a little tree, couldn't move, and he was in all sorts of strife. And so I was in charge of the gun group. That's a machine gun group. There's a machine gunner, he's 2IC, and then myself. So I said to these guys, come with me and we'll head around and outflank them. And so we possibly saved his life, you know, and didn't think anything about it at the time. But yeah, his wife, she reckons I saved his life anyway, and she thanks me every time I see her. But yeah, and that was our initiation to what it's all about, basically. From then on, you know, we probably made a mistake that day. We were walking down a track, and we learned you shouldn't walk down a track unless you want to get shot, basically. And most of the contacts you have over there too, they were initiated by the enemy, not us, because they'd be waiting to ambush you and all that sort of stuff. And but you knew what to do, you know, go to ground, find out what's going on and do whatever you have to do to get out of it. That could be calling in artillery or American gunships, whatever the case may be. So we learned a fair bit there, and then in early May we were out somewhere on a patrol mission, and we'd been out for a few days as well, probably the best part of a week. And that's when they decided they need to have this blocking force stopping the North Vietnamese in and out of Saigon. It was during the mini-Tet offensive towards the end of it, and that's when they were attacking Saigon, and they were coming down the Ho Chi Minh Trail through Cambodia and back into Vietnam, and we were sent in there as a blocking force, and with the guns from 102 Field Battery. It was a full fire support base, but it was a bit of a muck up getting in there. We were supposed to go in early in the morning, set up a proper perimeter and all this sort of stuff, but the helicopters that were taking us in, they were involved in a firefight with the Vietnamese at the time, and they didn't get around to picking us up until late in the afternoon. And then yeah, we got choppered in, and for some reason, I don't know why, still don't know why, the rifle companies, that's companies A, B, C and D, I was in Charlie Company, C Company, we were sent out into ambush positions away from where our mortar platoon was and the guns of 102 Field Battery. Then about 2 o'clock the next morning, it was raining. The North Vietnamese, unbeknown to us, there were 1 or 2 divisions of North Vietnamese regulars in the area, and they were just watching us come in, watching the Chinooks dropping off the big artillery guns, all this sort of thing. Knew exactly where they were and where our mortar platoon were, without any protection. And yeah, and they got hit very hard. We lost about, I think, 6 of our mortar platoon were killed. Pretty much all of them were wounded. A couple weren't, but the artillery guys had people killed. The number 6 gun, it was overrun. They lost control of that particular gun. Luckily, they took the firing pin out of it and kept it with them, so the North Vietnamese couldn't do anything with it. But and then the only way that our mortar platoon survived, Tony Jensen, he was the platoon commander, he got the artillery to fire Splintex rounds straight across the top of them. Splintex rounds like a big shotgun cartridge, you know. And so he just told his troops to go to ground. The artillery fired these Splintex rounds straight across the top of them, took out all the people that were attacking them and one thing and another, and really did save their lives. Next morning, that battle finished at daybreak. At daybreak, the Vietnamese pulled back and went wherever they were. We all came in from where our various ambush positions were, and then set up a proper perimeter around the guns and the mortars and battalion headquarters, wire out, claymore mines, everything like that. Then 3 days later, on the 16th of May, we got attacked again. We were outnumbered like 5-6 to 1, I suppose, something like that. So there was a lot of people around, and so we did get attacked again, but as I said, we were much better prepared. And the sky was just lit up. It was unbelievable, just so bright. There's a fixed-wing aircraft, we used to call it Spooky, and it was a real, machine guns and things like that, and it's just circling around, firing, and you could see the tracer rounds coming down. Every third or fourth bullet was a tracer round. It's just like a stream coming down. Then all of a sudden you see some more coming up. So the Vietnamese were firing at that particular gun as well. American gunships were involved in it. Artillery from an American base, probably, 5 or 6 mile away. They were sending in the artillery shells. We had a couple of killed that night, not in Charlie Company, but once again daylight came and it broke up. And there were about a lot of Vietnamese killed on that day, and we had to load them onto APC carriers, and that's armoured personnel carriers, take them away to bury them. And just a personal story, I got this smell of death on my hands, which I just couldn't get rid of, because you're picking them up by the legs and arms and putting them in the APCs, and I got this awful smell on my hands and couldn't get rid of it. And it lasted about a week, and I was just washing my hands, and goodness knows one, and all of a sudden I couldn't smell, and I haven't been able to smell since. So obviously the smell wasn't on my hands, it was in my brain, and my brain turned off my sense of smell, and that's just a offbeat. Then my birthday was on the 20th of May, and I'm sure I didn't even have any idea what day it was out there then, and so we certainly didn't celebrate it. But on the 30th of May, that was a big one that I was involved in, I guess. It was a company patrol going out. We're told on the evening of before, we'd be going out 8 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock, I'm not too sure what time it was. We'd be going out in the APC carriers, they'd be taking us out, and the Centurion tanks would be coming with us. There were, I think, 5 or 6 tanks there. Next morning, we all line up, ready to go, hop in the APCs. Then we learn the tanks are not coming. They were servicing them. So anyway, the APCs take us out. I'm not sure how far they took us, probably, 15 to 20 minutes in, I guess, something like that. Then they stopped, let us all out, and then they turned around and went back to Coral. So we were then left on our own. So we're a company, so you got 7, 8 and 9 platoons. I was in 8 platoon. 7 were leading, I know. We were next and 9 were behind us. I can't for the life of me remember what sort of formation we're in, whether it was single file or arrowhead. But anyway, where they dropped us off, it was a big clearing. It was quite clear. But then we moved across the clearing and into fairly thick jungle, really. Walked in there. Once again, not too sure how long it was, but 5-10 minutes. And we sort of ended up in a little clearing within the forest area, and it turned out to be a bunker system for the North Vietnamese. And all of a sudden, all hell just broke loose. They were firing at us from everywhere. We'd walked into a real ambush, actually. We went to ground. I know there was an anthill. Some of the anthills over there, they're quite big, and I was behind one of them, but you didn't know where the bullets were coming from anyway. But and then the machine gunner one of the machine gunners in 7 Platoon, he suddenly ended up next to me. And I sort of said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "Dell's just been killed." That was Del Abbott. He was number 2 on that particular gun. You have the machine gunner and you have his number 2. He carries more rounds, belts and that sort of stuff. An extra barrel because the barrel gets white hot if they have to change them. Anyway, the gun jammed and Del put his head up to try and clear whatever the stoppage was. He got shot through the head and killed straight away, which was quite sad actually. And we were in all sorts of trouble. We just couldn't move, and all of a sudden an American gunship appeared, and someone said, "You got a smoke grenade?" I had a smoke grenade, and they said, "You need to throw it so as he knows where we are and where they are." So I threw this grenade. I'm not too sure what colour it was, but anyway, only threw it from here to the wall away, I suppose. That's how close we were to thing. And so he knew where to fire, and he kept them at bay for a while. Then we called in the artillery, or our company commander called in the artillery from Coral, and it was nearly coming in on top of us because it had to be close because we're so close together. Eventually, I'm not too sure how long it was. It felt like a couple of hours, but it probably wasn't that long. The APCs and the tanks came back, and they came crashing through the jungle. I believe that some of the tanks, the APCs, they had to fight their way in because they had RPGs, rocket-propelled grenades, being fired at them on the way in. But anyway, they got there, and the tanks sort of blasted a few of the bunkers. We loaded we had 2 killed in there actually, and another few wounded. Loaded them into the APCs, took them out first, then the rest of us loaded in the MPs into the APCs. They took us about, a kilometre away into a clearing and put an airstrike in. But that machine gunner who left the gun there, we had to go back the next day to retrieve the gun, and funnily enough, it was still there. And that was... as far as being frightened, I don't know if I was frightened, but it was really tense, and you're just not knowing what's going to happen, and you're sort of trained to react to it, but it was really hairy. And that was the last major battle at Coral Balmoral. The 6th of June is when we pulled out of there. So we'd been there since the 12th of May till the 6th of June, but we'd been in the bush for a week before that. So we'd been out for about a month. No fresh clothes, apart from socks. They'd chop some socks out to us, but just the other clothes, you'd had them on 24 hours a day, basically. So we probably smelt a bit, but by then I couldn't smell. So, as far as rations were concerned, we're just on the bully beef rations and that sort of stuff. Apart from a couple of nights, they did chopper out some hot food from Nui Dat. And that was always very welcome, but the rest of the time, pretty rough all the way through. Yeah. Like you go out on patrol every second day probably, we'd go out and you could pretty much bet your life that you would have a contact with the enemy. Not a big one, but certainly sort of hit and run ones and that sort of thing. Another one of my good mates got shot. He got killed in one of those. Smokey Dawson, and it's quite... There's 2 guys I've just mentioned, Del Abbott and Ian Dawson. Smokey was his nickname. They went over on the Sydney with the rest of the battalion, and on their way over they were having a beer with another mate of mine, Fred Alderman, and they said to Fred, "We don't think we're coming back." And they didn't. They both got shot and didn't come back. Del was a sad story because his parents were anti-Vietnam War. They wanted him to go AWOL, absent without leave, just a deserter basically. But he was quite happy to go over, a real good bloke. but then his family wouldn't allow his body to be brought back to Australia. Yeah, it's very sad. And so he was buried at Butterworth, I think, in Malaya somewhere. And they also wouldn't let his name be put up on the War Memorial in Canberra. And when they repatriated a lot of those bodies from overseas there a few years ago, they still refused for his body to be brought back. And it's, his name is up on the War Memorial now, it has been now for a few years. But yeah, it's quite a sad story actually. At Coral, when the tanks pulled us out, it turned out that the driver of one of the tanks and the commander of the tank, I went through recruit training with both those guys in Puckapunyal, and then we met up at, and that's the circumstances we meet up actually. One of them I still see a bit. The other one, he lives up the country somewhere. So it's a small world, really. But my time was up. National Service for 2 years. My time was up, so I came back before the battalion came back. I got discharged out of the army. Pardon me. Went back to Ararat, back into the Commonwealth Bank, and in Ararat. So, and then played football with Ararat up there for another 68, another 5 or 6 years. We won a premiership in 1971. But I didn't cop any of the rubbish and crap that the guys down here copped, you know. I had a lot of good mates in Ararat and they really looked after me. They didn't talk about the war at all. And I was talking to another good mate, Barry Price, the guy I mentioned before. He said, we were told not to talk to you about the war, which is probably the worst thing that people could have told them not to do, you know. If they had have asked me a few things, I could have got it off my chest probably. But the guys down here in Melbourne, they copped a lot of, like they were banned from RSL clubs and all this sort of stuff, till the big welcoming home parade they had in Sydney back in, oh crikey, I was in Yarrawonga, so probably about 1980, something like that, so a long time after the war. One of these things here, this particular green, it's a unit citation of gallantry, and we got that for Coral. And General Westmoreland, he was the charge of the American troops over there. He actually came out to Coral, and he apparently offered our commanding officer, Philip Bennett, an award for the whole battalion, and Bennett knocked it back. And then we finally get this unit citation of gallantry in 2008, which was 50 years after the event, by which time a lot of the people who'd come back, they're no longer with us, you know, and it's just very disappointing that, you know, you've obviously earned these things, but they don't give them to you, and when they do, half the people can't get them. The family do, but yeah, very disappointing. And that's where coming back, and as I say, I was probably pretty fortunate because I was playing football in different clubs, different leagues, and I was shielded from a lot of that stuff, which was great. Yeah, I was in the bank for probably 35 years. Well, the good thing about the bank was that they made up my salary from what it was in the bank compared to what it was in the army. So I was getting paid more in the bank than what I was getting in the army. But when we went to Vietnam, your salary over there is tax-free and you get an area allowance on top of it. But the bank didn't take that into account. They just based it on what the salary would have been back here in Australia. So it was, you know, a nice little nest egg to come home to, if you like. So, yeah, and then, as I say, I went back to Ararat, then to Shepparton, and I got a couple of promotions in Shepparton. That's why I was there for about 9 years to start with. then another promotion to go to Bendigo, another one to come back to Shepparton, and then another one to go to Yarrawonga and manage Yarrawonga. By which stage our kids were in secondary school and we had to get them settled, so we came down to Melbourne, as I said, in 1989 as manager at Rosanna, then Watsonia, and then in Greensborough. So, yeah, and then I retired from the bank about 1997, and did a few other little things, but it's interesting. When I got back, I joined the RSL in Ararat, which was just a small one, and I was made very welcome. When I went to Shepparton, I didn't join the RSL up there, or Bendigo. I did in Yarrawonga, because I had a big Yarrawonga Mulwala Services Club. I joined that. Then when I came to Melbourne in 1989, I didn't join an RSL until about probably 1995, something like that. And that was through a good mate of mine from Ararat, who I grew up with, and we went in the army together as national servicemen. He went to Vietnam as well with 3RAR, and he was living down here in Melbourne. He was a member of Tramways East Melbourne RSL, and he got me to join there, which I did, and I've been a member ever since. Tramways has now joined with Camberwell because we outgrew our premises in Fitzroy and sold that and amalgamated with Camberwell RSL to form the Camberwell Pompey Elliott RSL, with $1 million in the bank from the sale of our property, so it's very good. But there's quite a lot of Vietnam veterans in the club as well, from different corps. You got them from Armoured Corps, you got them from engineers, tankies, artillery, so it's all there, and it's good. You can talk to those guys, and because everyone knows what everyone else has experienced, basically. Things like coral, for example, like no one's heard of fire support-based coral, unless you're talking to someone like myself who's been there. And we want to get that story out there to the general public. And I think it's really, really important to share stories like we're sharing here today. So as the next generation and the next one all know what we went through and how we came out the other side. When I got back from Vietnam, I went back to Ararat, played a lot of football in Ararat in the Wimmera League, represented the Wimmera League in inter-league games and things like that. Met my wife there and we got married, and then in the bank I got transferred to Shepparton in the Golden Valley League. I played about 3 or 4 years with Shepparton in the Golden Valley League, then basically retired. From Shepparton we went to Bendigo for a couple of years, Bendigo back to Shepparton, then to Yarrawonga, by which time my kids were in secondary school and we had to get them settled in a school, so came down to Melbourne in 1989. Didn't really get tied up with the club again until a couple of years ago. There was a book launch. It was called Carlton Blues Brilliance, Tigers something or other. I can't remember what it was, but anyway, and there was a book launch, and Robin, my wife, she said, "You want to go to this book launch?" I said, "Oh, well, I might as well." And it was here at the club rooms, and I got there reasonably early, and Jeff Southby, who was a great fullback for Carlton back in the 70s, he was part of the book. There was a story on him in the book as well. And he was just having a hamburger, and I just went over to him and I said, "I'd just like to shake the hand of a Carlton legend." And I got him I'd already bought the book and get him to sign it. When he was signing it, I just said to him, "I was here myself many years ago." He said, "When was that?" And I told him back in the 65, 66. He said, "You should join the Legends of the Spirit of Carlton." said, what's that? And he said, well, it's all previous players who formed this club to represent the club, basically. I said, I didn't play seniors, I only played seconds. He said, that doesn't matter, you can, as long as you play the game, it doesn't matter. As seconds, under 19s, whatever, or just a supporter, you can still join it, which I did, and sort of got the connection back again with the club. They have a luncheon every year, a big luncheon with a fundraising one. Go there and catch up with a lot of old players, so that's good. Yeah. Yeah, well, we have 3 children, 3 kids, 2 girls and a boy. It was compulsory. They became avid Carlton supporters. They had no choice. And they are actually. So, yeah, 2 girls and a boy. They're now aged 52, 50 and 48. Have 4 grandchildren, all girls, all Carlton supporters. Yeah, and they're aged, or 2 of them are be 16 this year. 2 different families, and a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old. Yeah, quite a close-knit family actually. We have regular family catch-ups and things like that. So yeah, we're in a good space as far as that's concerned. I had some problems. There's no doubt about it. It's growing. You know, you think you're all right. You get back from Vietnam and. People might mention about counselling and that sort of stuff, and we don't need that, you know. Nothing wrong with us until it hits the fan, you know, 30 odd years later, and you know, Robin probably got me through it all actually. I won't really delve into a lot of the problems, but yeah, I went off the rails quite a bit, and they stood by me, and now it's happy little unit, which is great. Yeah. Well, I'm probably most proud that I've come out the other end and really have a good family social life, or full family life basically. What I should have done and I didn't do was talk to people, even my family, they knew I went to Vietnam, but that was pretty much it. Even Robin, I never spoke to her about stuff like that, and it was probably affecting me, and I should have been talking to her. So I would, if I had my time over again, I would have been much more open as far as discussing it with, especially with Robin, but then also with the kids too. Yeah, and I think that would be my message to people. If there's something worrying you, get it off your chest and talk about it. I'd like to be remembered as helping my mates as far as that's concerned, which I do a lot of that through the RSL. But more importantly, a good person, I think, and looked after the family as much as I could. Yeah.